Sorry. We're going to take a minute to work on our relationship. We'll be right back. I think that we try to think that it doesn't exist, want to say that it doesn't exist, and maybe it'll just go away. Maybe we don't have to deal with it. It's kind of how, well, we learned about sex from our parents.
Yeah, my mom really, honestly, she didn't talk to me about it. When I was 9, she handed me a book that says, a doctor talks to a 9 and 10-year-old. And then when I turned 11, a doctor talks to an 11, 12-year-old. 2 books. And they're like dissertations. I had no clue what they were talking about. It was like all in this medical terminology and ew. And so fortunately I had friends that helped me out.
How did that work out for you?
Well, that's later in the sermon.
My story is remarkably similar, unfortunately, but a little bit different. If you've heard me tell my testimony, my story, I grew up a very legalistic, good kid. My dad was a pastor. And I went to this small Christian school. And you know how it is at Christmas? Teachers, you take the names and you cut up everybody's name, you cut up all the names on a piece of paper, put a name, you put them in a basket, people draw and get a name, and you have to buy that person a Christmas gift, and you have a big party.
How old were you?
6th, 7th grade. Maybe even 8. I think it was 7th, 6th or 7th. And so, this boy got my name. And he looked at me as Brian, he's like, oh my word, what do you buy him? Because he's like the perfect child. So you can't buy anything normal. So he bought me James Dobson's Preparing for Adolescence. That was my Christmas gift. You want to do the whole fake surprise thing? I mean, it's not a Transformer, it's not Legos, it's James Dobson. That's what I always wanted.
I think that's the sad part. The sad part is you read it.
I did take it home and I read it, thinking, being a legalistic good kid, I figured, well, I should probably prepare. If James Dobson says I should, then I should. So I read the book. And he has a chapter on sex, which I was just hitting puberty at this point, so I really hadn't thought about a lot of these things before. And they came as a bit of a shock. And was kind of revealing. And I went, wow, okay. So my parents, my mom, let me rephrase, not my parents, my mom became concerned. Concerned that I had learned about sex and that they had not had a role in this undertaking. So I was having a wart removed. It does matter to the story. I'm going every week to the doctor's office, 1 day a week, and you know how the doctors are, you wait for like 45 minutes on the exam table waiting for him to show up, and it's like 8 o'clock in the morning, there's not that many patients to throw off your schedule. So I'm sitting there, and my dad's there with me, he'd take me, and finally one of these weeks, because it went for like 6 weeks or more, my dad goes, so Mom wants me to talk to you. Do you have any questions? Anybody want to bet what I said? No. Not a question in the world, Ma, Dad. Not at all. Especially because Mom instigated it. That's all the weirder. And I think because we're afraid to deal with it, we bounce between these two extremes of wanting to pretend it doesn't exist and then abhorring it on the other hand. Growing up, the worst sin was a sexual sin in my family. The atmosphere that was given off around anything to do with relationships was one of almost horror, and especially anything having to do with physical contact, aka eventually leading a long time later into sex. It was this taboo subject. And somehow I think as Christians we have made sexual sins bigger than any other sin. We've made them the ultimate sin. Whatever particular one is your little hobby horse. There's nothing as bad as whatever the issue is that you pick. Premarital sex, homosexuality, adultery.